Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about what is the closing process in real estate. What does the closing process consist of when doing a real estate transaction? Throughout this video, I'm going to break down the closing process in real estate. So the next time you do a deal, you won't be blindsided with some of the tedious things you have to deal with when it comes to closing a real estate transaction. As we roll in this video, I want to help you understand why the closing process is in place and what steps are included in that process. I will also help you understand what the process looks like and how you can use it for your advantage. If you're ready, let's go. So what is the closing process in real estate? So the closing process is in place and it allows the buyer and the seller to take all the necessary time and measures to finalize a real estate transaction. The process starts once the real estate transaction is signed and goes until the day the buyer signs the closing documents and ownership is transferred to the buyer and recorded while the funds are transferred to the seller, completing the closing process. Now there's a lot of steps along the path, but typically the closing process takes around 60 days. It could be more or less depending on the type of loan the person's getting, or even if they're getting a loan at all, or they're coming forward in the transaction with just cash. But typically 60 days is a standardized time that the closing process takes. So let's talk about the steps involved in the closing process. So step one, once the real estate transaction is signed by both the buyer and the seller, is they both agree on a title company to use and open an escrow account with them. That escrow account is managed by the title company that both parties choose. The nice thing about a title company is it's a third-party individual or organization that upholds the contract for both the buyer and the seller without any bias. That third party holds all the contracts and documents and all the funds associated with that real estate transaction until the end of the entire process. In some states, they actually require that you get a real estate attorney involved in that process, and most of the states that require that are east of the Mississippi. I experienced this when we bought our short-term rental in Blue Ridge, Georgia. They required us to get a real estate attorney involved in the process. But the nice thing about it is the real estate attorney worked very closely with the title company and is a pretty smooth transaction, and I think that most organizations that require that also have a very similar process in place where it becomes really smooth for the buyer and the seller and doesn't take up a bunch of unnecessary time. So the next step is to complete the title search and order title insurance. The main purpose of a property title search is to make sure the property that is being bought and sold doesn't have any liens, encumbrances, or pending lawsuits or claims on the property that the seller might not be aware of. Besides establishing who really owns the property, a title search can also ensure that all legal matters are disclosed and taken care of prior to the final closing of the transaction. Any judgments or liens that aren't discovered before you close could mean you end up with legal expenses down the road to make sure that you have a property that is clean and clear. I remember many years ago, I'd put an offer on a piece of property. It was a land deal, and the person I was buying it from, as we started to go through this process of a title search and order title insurance, it came back. There were some lawsuits that were pending against the individual that I was buying it from. Because of that, I mean, there was nothing necessarily on the property itself, but very easily could have been, because this was one of the few assets this individual owned, and where he had pending lawsuits, if those individuals felt like he wasn't going to pay them back the money in the lawsuit, or if they wanted to secure their money with something, it would be that property. So it ended up being a really good situation for me where I didn't go forward with the purchase of the property, and I'm glad I didn't, because it was during that 2005 or 6 period of time where properties were going like this in value. But shortly after that, that's when we saw the market crash. The real estate bubble burst in 2007, 2008. So this is a necessary process, necessary step in the closing process. Now, the second part of that is getting title insurance, getting a title insurance policy. The policy protects the buyer against any future claims to closing, and still it protects the lenders and real estate owners against any damages or losses stemming from title defects, liens, and encumbrances. The next step is to get a home and pest inspection. Some people might say, well, why do I need to get a pest inspection? And in certain areas, you might not need to, right? If you live in Idaho and it gets super cold in the wintertime, or Montana or some of these places, you might not need a pest inspection. But most places that are in the southern part of the United States, eastern part of the United States, even the western part of the United States, are probably going to need a pest inspection, because the last thing you want to find on a property is termites or other wood-destroying pests that could have a major effect on the property at some point down the road. So a pest inspection is really important when buying a piece of property, especially in those areas that I just mentioned. And a home inspection, in my mind, is one of the most important things you can do during the closing process if you're the buyer. And getting a home inspection is something you want to do right away, right after the documents are signed and agreed upon, right after you open escrow with a title company. You want to get on the schedule a home inspection, because many times these individuals are scheduled weeks or months out. So the sooner you can get them out there during your due diligence period is when you want it. And typical due diligence period is 14 to 21 days. So to order that home inspection right away is really important. And a home inspection is a professional that's going to go into the home and they are going to look at everything from the plumbing to the heating to the cooling to the walls to the attic to the basement to the crawl space, whatever it might be. They are going to check everything and give you a full report on any issues that they see in the property. It could be water damage that happened years ago, that they find mold or certain things like that, or pipes that are really rusty, or asbestos in the roof. There's a number of different things they can find. That's why these are so important. Matter of fact, I put an offer on a property down in the panhandle of Florida. It looked like an awesome deal. Everything was selling over $1 million. We got this property under contract for $810,000. And it was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath. And this property was close to the scenic highway 30A, which is where everybody wants to be. It's where all the nightlife, where all the restaurants, where all the good things are happening, and it's close to the beach. And so we thought we had a great short-term rental locked up, ready to go. And the upstairs area could be transformed into a bedroom, thus giving us 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, or giving us 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, which would have been awesome. Now, we had a home inspection done there and it came back and they found multiple issues. We ended up not going through with it because I lived in Idaho, the property's in Florida. Trying to get some of those things done would have been difficult, but a home inspection came back and it allowed me to then make a decision as a real estate investor to say, you know what, I'm not moving forward with this because of this situation. The other thing a home inspection can do is if it comes back with situations that look like they could be a challenge for you as a homeowner or as an investor, you could then go back and renegotiate the deal with the seller. Now, why would you do that? And they might come back and say, no way am I renegotiating. But if it's a serious enough issue or a challenge, even if you can get an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 off the purchase price, that could be a good deal. And you're in a position to do so because right now the property is locked up under contract between you and the seller. And if you were to walk away from it, they got to start that whole process over again, which means they've got to put it back on market, find another seller, and go through that exact same process. By them discounting it $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 might be the best thing they can do because they know the next buyer that comes might have the same issues, or they'll have to fix those issues prior to listing it again. So it's a fantastic time to renegotiate the deal. It's one of those hidden gems when going through the closing process that could benefit you as a real estate investor. The next step is to get a lender approved appraisal. Now, this is important to do early on too, because once again, appraisers are typically scheduled out weeks or months in advance. So the second you open the escrow account, we need to get a lender approved appraiser out there to do an appraisal on the property. Now, if it's a commercial appraisal on a big piece of property or a commercial property, that's going to take a lot more time, be a lot more expensive. If it's on a residence, it's less time, less expensive. But getting that ordered early on is important. The next step is schedule the closing date, right? This is the day when everything is finished. You sign the closing documents and the money is transferred to the seller. The transaction is completed, it's done. And the next step right before the final closing is to do a final walkthrough. This is where you go through, you look at the home, you look at everything just to make sure that you really want to move forward with the transaction. I've done this virtually where I've had the realtor put me on FaceTime and take me through the property, so it can be done if you're not on site, but I definitely recommend being on site because there might be something that stands out to you as a real estate investor or as the person that's going to buy that home as the homeowner that you might find that might make you question the deal or even give you more comfort to move forward with the deal. And finally, show up at the closing table, sign the documents, own the home. The closing process, buying a home, is an exciting time. The closing process can seem tedious, but understanding it and knowing what to do and even some tricks that'll help you could really benefit you. Now, these are some things that I've seen through the closing process that I've utilized to benefit me as a real estate investor. I'd love to hear what you've done. So please comment below. Let's engage in a dialogue. And as always, I've got a free gift for you, aaronsfreetraining.com. Just go ahead and click on the link below. It's a short-term rental calculator where you put the information and it spits out to you whether it's a good deal or not. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Have an awesome day.